Kia, good morning. Thank you, and thank you so much for an amazing welcome. We get nothing like that at conferences in the UK, so I was very pleased to see it. Obviously, big thanks to ACID, to Explore and to POWER for inviting me here. I've come all the way from Scotland, as Jonathan said, so your weather is somewhat familiar to me. But ironically, somebody sent me a picture of Scotland yesterday. It was 35 degrees. So I've missed the summer yet again. I was here last year, exactly the same time I missed the summer in Scotland. Sorry. Okay. So I've been invited to talk a little bit about the PBS work that we do at Build and some of the work we've been doing with Explore. So the title of my presentation was so long it fits on 2 slides, I'm afraid. So this is the second part of it. So working together and supporting the implementation of positive behaviour support in the UK and New Zealand. So just really to probably I should start actually by telling you I am slightly jet lagged. This may manifest itself with sudden blank expressions, okay? So don't worry, all right? I have some notes here and I have Bronwyn and Chris and Sean from Explore to rescue me if I completely forget where I am and what I'm doing, okay? So just bear with me there. It feels like it's the middle of the night to me, okay? The other thing to tell you is some of the things I'm going to tell, it's a bit of a sad story at the beginning that I'm going to tell, okay, but it does cheer up later on. So stay with it, okay? Stay with it. It does get better. It's a story of hope, okay? So just to tell you a little bit about Build. So Build, we've been established for 40 years. We're a small charity in the UK. There's 12 full-time staff and we have about 40 consultants that travel around doing amazing things and some expert advisors. I think we punch a bit above our weight considering we're such a small organisation, but we have this vision at Build which I guess is probably the same vision that everyone in this room shares. So that's a vision of a society where everybody has equal opportunities. So the way that we work at Build to deliver that mission is we're trying to build evidence base for what works. We're trying to build skills and capacity for the workforce. And we're trying to build community. And I was really pleased because when I looked on the ACID website, I saw there was a mention of community. And I absolutely believe that community is the way to go. We are much better when we work together. Okay, so the best way, at Build, we think the best way that we can achieve the vision that we have is to aim to improve the support that's received by people who are often described as complex or challenging. Okay, and when I hear those 2 labels, I sometimes think actually, in many cases, we've failed to understand what those people need. Actually, their needs sometimes aren't complex. Sometimes these are just basic needs which we have failed to understand and meet. Sometimes just basic needs like the right kind of communication or the kind of healthcare that people need. So we've failed to provide the right support at the right time for people. So they end up with these labels being complex and challenging. We were lucky enough to have someone called David Bitoniak. Some of you might have heard of him over in the UK recently. And one of the things that he says is that distressed or challenging behaviours are important messages. They're really important things that people are telling us about the quality of the life that they've got. And we really need to listen to those. And I suppose in some ways for me, those 2 labels, complex and challenging, almost indicate service failure. Sometimes they indicate that we have failed these people. Okay, so a lot of our energy and effort goes into supporting the people that support those people. That's where we think we're best placed to make a difference. You'll hear the term challenging behaviour. There's lots of different terms for it. Personally, I prefer the term behaviour of concern because it's just a reminder that we actually need to do something about that, really. The responsibility is for us. Okay. So we do this through a number of ways. So we workforce development. So that's kind of training and learning in different formats. We do some organisational work and development work and some consultancy work, and sometimes we work on grant-funded projects. We have about 5 community of practices, and these seem to be really important for improving practice. We publish guidance and we have some publications. Some of them are industry standard publications, and we do have conferences as well. And we're hoping that maybe some people from Explore may well come over to our conference next year. Okay, so that's about BUILD. So just a little bit about CAPS, which is the Centre for the Advancement of Positive Behaviour Support. It's part of BUILD, and I was recruited really to set it up. Most of our work is in the area of learning disability sector. So most of the training and consultancy we provide is to people with learning disabilities and people who work with them. But more recently, we've been expanding into wider fields. We're working in mental health and dementia and acquired brain injury as well, because we find PBS is just as effective for those populations. We're probably the biggest UK provider of PBS training at the moment as well. So that's CAPS. So I've got quite an ambitious presentation here. I've got quite a few things I need to tell you. If I don't get through telling all of them to you, you can come and see me either in the tea break or in my session, and I'll finish it off. I've got Jonathan trying to keep me to time, and Chris has promised if I start ranting or rambling, he's going to do that or that. Yes. Okay. And if I start staring like this, okay? Okay. Are you hearing me okay? I'm quite conscious that I move about quite a lot, okay, and that's probably quite annoying for you in the filming, isn't it? No, it's okay. All right. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to really briefly explain what positive behaviour support is and why it is important. I'm going to give a really brief overview of the history and the challenges that have arisen from the implementation of PBS in the UK. Now, I have a really lovely poster out there in the foyer. It's actually on the front of Topo's stand. It's the history of PBS in a timeline, so you can go and have a look at that. Unfortunately, you might have to get down on your knees to look at it because he's put it down here. But it is, if you're interested in the history of PBS, it's a really nice poster. I'm really proud of that one. I'm going to describe then some of the things that we've been doing in the UK because we haven't got it right. So we're still really learning. We're trying to get it right. Some of the initiatives that we've been developing in an attempt to prevent kind of dilution really of PBS and to make it sustainable so it doesn't just get washed away. We had it before in the 90s, you probably did as well, and it washed away, yeah? It's a familiar nod over there, yeah? So this is the reinvigoration of PBS, and we're determined not to let it go this time. We've learnt a lot. Okay, so I'm going to just introduce, I must try not to tell me if I start walking away from the microphone, I was about to then. Introduce a workforce and development framework that we've been working hard of, and it really changed the way that we deliver PBS training, so you might be interested in that. And then I'm going to just talk about our experience of applying this enhanced model of coaching, of practice leadership, and developing communities of practice to support PBS. And then a little bit of reflection on our partnership with Explore and what we have learned from working alongside them. At BUILD, we're a learning organisation, so we jumped at the chance to work with colleagues in New Zealand, and we've certainly learned a lot, which has been wonderful. And then if I've got time at the end, I'm going to just present an evaluation model, which helps to measure outcomes for PBS and PBS training. So does that sound okay? That's quite a lot, isn't it? Okay. If you start to fade, just kind of wave at me. The other thing I've got is a little animation film, which I hope to have time to show you at the end. Explains PBS really nicely and is much more interesting and much better than anything I can say. So you can hold out for that. Okay, so I think most of you, some of you, certainly people I can see in this room know what positive behaviour support is. You have PBS already here. You have good PBS, I know. I've seen it and I've heard about it. Okay. Really, so when we talk about PBS, we talk about it being a framework, not an intervention, not a therapy, but a framework for providing long-term support to people. Really simply, I suppose for me, it's a process that helps us identify what the problem is for people, what's missing from their lives, what the purpose is of the behaviours that they're presenting that are causing us concern. And then it helps us plan the support that they need to get their needs met, to fix that problem for them. And we might do that. We might do that by adjusting the environment. We might do that by changing our behaviour. Or we might do that by teaching them some new things, okay? Is that what people understand by PBS? Is that similar to your some nods? Yeah, okay. It's a blend. It's talked about as being a blend of, like a Venn diagram of values and science. So it's the bit in the middle. It needs both. It can't just be values and it can't just be science. But we always say that the values lead. Okay, so these are values, inclusion, choice, participation and equality of opportunity. These are things that we would want for ourselves and our own families. Okay. So one of the values and science bit is really important. Rob Horner, who's I suppose a kind of PBS superstar, he talks about PBS approaches as being a blend of the rights of people with disabilities with the science of learning and behaviour, which I think is quite a nice way of putting that. But the rights of people are at the beginning. The rights of people are the one that informs any interventions we do. Okay. So can I just get some water? Sorry. So, positive behaviours. Oh, I don't want to put it up there. So, positive behaviours. It's not behaviour modification, okay? And I have this quote from Ted Carr to kind of illustrate that, really. So, it's about PBS is really about fixing the problem, not fixing the person or not fixing the behaviour. It's about fixing the problem. If we fix the problem, the behaviour may well go away, okay? So that's a really important distinction. So the aim of positive behaviour support is to improve quality of life. That's the aim, not behaviour change. The aim is to improve quality of life. And we would say, and if you've been on a coaches program like Dot, you will know what I'm going to say now. We would say that improving quality of life is an intervention as well. It's the best intervention. It should be the priority intervention. We know that if we improve people's lives, their behaviour of concerns are likely to go down anyway. Okay. So if we unpick this quality of life bit a bit, what kind of things, I'm going to ask for some audience participation now, what kind of things do you think mean quality of life? Anybody? Loving relationships, yeah. Anyone? Having people in your life that aren't paid to be in your life, okay. A nice place to live. Something meaningful to do during the day. And something to look forward to as well. Yeah? Anything else?
A sense of belonging or being part of a group.
Brilliant. Anyone else? Choice? Money to do things with. Yep. Excellent. Okay. Choice, yep, lovely. Have friends. Absolutely, friends. That's really, really important. And is Keith McVilly in here? Yeah, so Keith has written some lovely stuff about friends, haven't you? Yeah.
I think friendships and friendship networks are the most important things that come out of PBS.
Yeah. Okay. So those quality of life, they're the same for people with learning disabilities and people without learning disabilities, aren't they? Okay. So what I'm going to present now, and this is a little bit sad, This is some research I saw the other day. This is from Julie Beadle-Brown from the Tizard Centre in the UK, and this is a kind of summary of 15 years of her research. Okay, and it really helped us. It really helped us to think about the skills gap that we've got. We've got staff who want to do the best they can, but we think sometimes they may not have been given the skills to do them properly. Okay, so some of the things that Julie found out, and this was over 15 years doing research in different supported services for people. She found out on average, people spend less than 30 minutes in every hour engaged. And by engaged, we mean actually doing something. So half the time people aren't actually doing anything. She found on average people spend at least 45 minutes on their own with no contact from anybody. She also found that people who live together do not usually interact with each other. And people spend most of their time sitting down. And this is likely to be worse for those who have got more severe disabilities and or autism. Okay. The other thing we had recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Learning Disability Mortality Review in the UK. And surprise, surprise, it found that people with learning disabilities die at a younger age. Okay, I mean, and I probably would guess that. I was quite shocked to guess that. For males, that's 51. For females, 56. And if you've got profound and multiple disabilities, 41. So we're not getting things right, are we? Okay. So some more of Julie's findings. She found that help to be engaged, help to actually do something, was being given to people for probably less than 1 minute per hour. Okay? So people that work with them are doing other things. 1/5 get good support with choice making. A couple of people mentioned choice, but some people need support to have a choice, don't they? So 4/5 of people aren't getting good support with choice. This is in the UK. And 1/3 are supported by teams where communication was rated as appropriate. Okay, so that 2/3 of people, the communication that they're getting isn't apparently appropriate. And I know Sheridan's going to speak later, isn't she, about on the subject of communication. Okay, so in those services, reported by staff are reporting that people who've got both autism and a learning disability, 100% of those people from staff reports were showing behaviours of concern or challenging behaviours, if you'd like to call it that. And 50% of that was rated as severe. But then if you see this, where 40% of people with autism aren't living in autism-friendly environments, okay, you think, well, there's got to be a link there. And most of those environments that aren't autism-friendly, which she found to be very high arousal. Okay, you know, and this is very sad. So people who do not understand or use verbal communication usually only have verbal communication used with them. So people are using behaviours to express their needs and wants. Okay, so the link is there. So does that feel a bit like what's happening here? I don't know. I mean, this is 15. I mean, I said it was sad at the beginning. You know, we're going to cheer up a bit later on. But I think it's important to know that we haven't got the basics right. You know, so some of you will know this PBS pyramid. It's kind of, you have to have a pyramid in every PBS presentation. I've been told that. I've got 2 actually, so you can report that back. So this PBS pyramid, it's the school-wide pyramid, the school-wide PBS pyramid. I think it's based basically on a public health model, but it applies to all sectors. So if you look at it from a workforce development, you know, from a workforce development lens, you can see what you can see is that. Can I go in over there? What you can see is that the green bit is just good support, really. If all the staff in that green bit, that's all the staff that have direct contact with people, know a bit about positive behaviour support. They understand basics, that there's a function to behaviour. They understand about triggers. They understand about engaging people. They understand about active support. We're likely really to keep people going there, okay? There's always going to be some more people who need a little extra support, okay? So they might need just a few, some of the time they might need some strategies to help them, might need a little bit of focused support. So if we're going to have those people, and quite often those people might have a small behaviour support plan, but we'll need staff who understand how to implement those behaviour support plans. So at the bottom, we need staff who understand the basic principles and understand what good support is. And then we might also need some staff who know a little bit more. At the top, for those people, the very few people who are in crisis and need intensive, probably full functional assessments and behaviour support plans, we need people that are experts, people that are PBS qualified, and people that can write those plans. The problem with this model is that quite often most of our resources are aimed at the top, are put into the intensive support. That's where the experts go, that's where all the money goes. And very little support is put into keeping the green bit going. Whereas we know that if we get that right in the green bit, people are less likely to need support there and support there. Okay, so I think the pyramid shows that really well. But the tendency is to put all the money into the intensive stuff. Okay, but quite often what happens is an expert will come in to work intensive support, and we put a really good plan in. But the staff in the yellow and the green, working in the yellow and the green areas, won't have the skills to support that plan, or the service won't have a model that supports that plan. So actually the plan won't work and people stay at the top. Whereas actually if we can get that bottom bit right, and I'm going to shout out to active support here, because actually what we would say is active support. This is the preventative zone, the green bit is preventative work. Do people know what active support is here? Yeah, that's good. So it's a way of engaging people in their everyday lives, and sometimes we need to skill up staff to be able to do that. They don't seem to be able to do it naturally. Active support has been described as state-of-the-art prevention. So really, we really want to be thinking about working in that green bit. Okay, so we have this, this is a definition of challenging behaviour, which I'm sure most of you have seen before. It's a really old Emerson one, still used. So it's basically describing the challenging behaviour of a person. It's saying that this is behaviour that has an impact on the person, has an impact on their quality of life, may cause harm to themselves or others, but actually puts them at risk of being excluded. They can't enjoy the community like the rest of us. So this is the Emerson definition. So recently, I found a slightly alternative definition, which I quite like. So this is the definition of challenging behaviour of a person. And this is the definition of the challenging behaviour of a service. Okay? I was very pleased when I found this. So, definition of a service challenging behaviour. This is acts and omissions by a service supporting a person that are of a frequency, duration or intensity such that they risk limiting the social inclusion, the quality of life, the individuality and the health and well-being of the person with a learning disability. And I think that's quite neat. I was quite pleased to find that. Yeah. Okay. So you can see there is a gap between people's needs and the skills that people have. It's quite a clear gap, I think. Okay, another way we could look at this conundrum really is if we look at the risk factors for people developing those behaviours of concern. So this was based on work done by Richard Hastings and colleagues, 2013. So it's fairly recent. So he looked at all the research and all the things that were going to be risk factors for people. So You're more likely to develop behaviours of concern if you have underlying health or sensory problems. Well, that's quite obvious, but they may be diagnosed or not diagnosed. Okay, so we know some people don't have brilliant healthcare, don't have good diagnosis. So that's a risk factor. There are some genetic conditions that are a risk factor as well. You're more likely to develop behaviours of concern if you've had negative life events. That's quite obvious. So if we think about the people we support, that probably applies to quite a lot of them. Lack of communication skills is another risk factor. Well, we know the link there. If you can't communicate, you're more likely to use your behaviour to get your needs met. Impoverished social networks. We talked about friends. We talked about friendships. So if you don't have many friends, you're more likely to develop behaviours of concern, and that fits with all of us, doesn't it? Lack of meaningful activity. If people are bored, they don't have stuff to do, more likely to resort to behaviours of concern, things like self-stimulation. Or just doing stuff to make stuff happen sometimes, I think. Psychiatric or mood problems. I mean, why this, I find this model particularly sad because we're looking at perpetuating factors, but also these are maintaining factors. If you think about it, if you have behaviours of concern, if you have challenging behaviour, people give you that label, you're less likely to have any friends. Who wants to be your friend? Who wants to try and get you to do something in the daytime? Well, we're not upset, John. You're more likely to not have your health needs met, aren't you? Because it's too difficult to get medical help for you. So this is quite a sad model. So we talk about this a lot on the coaches programs. So I think it's our job. This is like a cycle. This is our job to intervene into that cycle. That's our responsibility to make change happen here. Okay, so why PBS then? Well, other approaches to challenging behaviours of concern haven't been terribly successful. Okay, so we have institutionalisation. That's one way of, and actually, in the UK at the moment, we still have nearly 3,000 people living in hospitals. The average stay for someone going to assessment and treatment unit, usually because they've had a challenging behaviour, is 5 years. That's not an assessment, is it? That's a long stay. I know. It's quite shocking, really. Behaviour modification, where people try and make the person fit. Control and restraint. This is quite a common management technique in the UK. So it doesn't really sort out the problem, though. It might prevent the crisis from escalating any further. But it's pretty traumatic for both parties. Do you have training here? Do you have training in control and restraint? Yeah. Okay. It's kind of dealing with the problem too late. Okay. Half an hour. Okay. Medication. We have a big campaign I'm going to speed up now quickly. We have a big campaign in the UK called Stop Over Medication of People. We have lots of people on antipsychotic medication. That don't need to be, that haven't got a mental illness. They've just had showed some behaviours of concern. So for us, PBS in the UK really is really linked to the journey from deinstitutionalisation, and that's a continuing journey for us. A lot of people in the UK were looking to the US in the 80s and 90s, the work of Lavinia and Horner and Carr, who were looking at different ways of supporting people. So who was about in the 90s? Who remembers 5 service accomplishments? Okay, what are they? Yeah, good. Not bad. That was just a check to see if you were all awake. Okay, so well done you. We really tried to set our services up to meet these service accomplishments. So we had the Mansell reports were quite significant for us. So Jim Mansell was saying that actually we didn't need different types of services. We just wanted staff to be skilled and services to be more organised. Fortunately, nobody listened, and we set up quite a lot of challenging behaviour services because they work. Okay, so there was some revolving doors then because we knew the community wasn't ready the first time. We sent people out into the community wasn't ready. Staff weren't ready. A lot of them were nursing staff. They weren't ready to move from care to support. Healthcare, there was poor healthcare in the community waiting for them and limited psychological support. And some of the social relationships and roles that they had just disappeared and weren't replaced. So we didn't do a great job. Okay, so a lot of people ended up having more restrictive lives or actually going back into hospitals. So this is important, this practice leadership. So Jim Mansell was saying, he was a very wise man, he was saying then actually one of the reasons that this didn't fail was that the managers of those services weren't on the floor. So there were staff that weren't well trained, trying their best to deal with people who were quite distressed, trying to integrate them into the community, but managers were given jobs as administrators. They weren't on the floor. Okay, so they weren't leading from the front. So there's a big lesson, and this problem continues today where we have managers of service who hardly ever go in services. They don't know what's going on. And that became really important. We had a big scandal called Winterbourne View. I know, I'm so sorry. I try. If I hold on here like this, I try that. It's my natural thing to... Okay, I try. You can do. So, Winterbourne View really showed us how important practice leadership was. There was a guy called Wayne Rogers there. He was a practice leader, but he was a bad practice leader. Yeah, am I putting it here? Is that okay? Is that better? How's that? Okay? Yay! We've broken free. I mean, we'll gallop around the room now. Okay, so Wayne Rogers, he was a practice leader. He was a bad practice leader. An undercover journalist got in and filmed terrible abuse. People were following Wayne's lead. The managers were in the service. If you look at this, the managers in this building, this was an assessment treatment unit. The managers' offices were up there. Wayne was doing bad stuff down here. There was no one keeping in check. Unfortunately, we know that if staff join a service, they're more likely to go with established practice than policy. They'll go with the way that things are being done. That's just the way it happens. So the reaction to that was the Transforming Care programme for us, which pretty much had PBS at the heart of it. PBS was seen as the solution. One of the things that Winterbourne View exposed was the fact that there were a lot of people living in hospitals. People hadn't realised that. So there was a pressure to close all those beds. Big focus on reducing restrictive practices. So suddenly, in the UK, everybody wanted PBS. It's like a gold rush for the second time. Still a bit like that. Okay, I'm not going to read that one. So this presented some challenges for us. Not least that physical intervention training was mandatory in most services, and people called that PBS. We've got terrible workforce recruitment issues. I don't know what it's like here, but we have, a third turnover. There's a little bit, I'd say, bun fight's not quite the right word, about who's responsible for PBS, how it integrates with other disciplines, and about the fidelity. Everybody set themselves up in this gold rush as PBS services, PBS trainers. So some of that wasn't very good quality. And this do you have the train and hope model where services send people on training and hope for the best, basically? That pretty much is it, isn't it? Okay, well, you've all been on training, now you know what to do. People like going on training, but there's no evidence it has impact on practice. So we need to think a little bit differently about that. And in our overall context of austerity, we've got to think really creatively. We've got to make stuff work for people. We can't really continue like this. This is quite a neat model, actually. Well, I use this if I'm Actually, no, I'm not going to show you this because I probably haven't got time. If you want to come, I can talk about this in the session. See, there we go. That'll tempt you into my session later. It's really just to show, it's how we show organisations how much resource they put into that kind of training. And actually, if you take that to a board meeting, if you get those figures from an organisation, take that to a board meeting, their jaws drop. They suddenly realise where it's all going wrong and why their staff are using so much restraint. So I'd recommend the pyramid model. So some of the things we did in the UK, we've got an international journal. We developed a definition of PBS, so we all kind of know what PBS is and what PBS isn't now. We can audit from that. It's got 10 components. I've got a little animation film which I probably won't have time to show you, but you can get that on the Build website, and it shows you the 10 components. It's nice. We have a competence framework developed by some academics, which is really useful. It's a bit weighty. You know, it's a bit hard to plough through, but it's good stuff, basically. We've developed a workforce framework, which I will talk a little bit about, and we have developed some key PBS messages. For us, that was a big step forward. We managed to get all the agencies in the UK in PBS to agree to the same messages about PBS, because we were all giving slightly different messages. It was terribly confusing for people, so we've agreed on some standard messages. We've got some training standards, a self-assessment tool, and I'm just tell you a little about the PBS. That's the key messages. I've got some copies with me if people want to, I don't know where I've put, I think they're on the table there actually. I can give people if you're interested in those key messages. So we have the Positive Behaviour Support Allowance, which is a partnership of organisations. This is the first time we've got people in the room together to talk about scaling positive behaviour support up. We're very hopeful that this is a way forward for us. This is where the hope starts. We're going to work together on this. We've made a pact. So our organisational workforce development framework, this was a significant change in the way that we delivered PBS training. We were pretty much doing the train and hope model. People would ring up Build, they'd get Emma or Gail, the admin staff in, and go, can we have some PBS? And they go, yes, you can. We'll send some people out to give it to you. And people would sign up. And when I started work at Build, that was the way it went. Actually, we knew it wasn't really making any impact. So we looked at really what does PBS need to survive. It needs skilled workers, it needs practice leaders, it needs access to appropriate levels of behavioural expertise, and it needs an organisational commitment to systems change. So now when people ring up Build and they go, can we have some PBS? We go, no, you can't, unless you talk to Tom. Tom is the PBS manager. You talk to Tom, we'll audit what you need, and then we'll come out, and you need to commit to that. Otherwise you can't have it. So some organisations go, oh no, we'll just go around and get John to do it then. Well, that's fine. But actually, it really works. It works so much better if we could get organisations to sign up and understand what they need to do. And make sure they get the right training as well. Some people were paying for training they don't need. Some people were getting the wrong kind of training. So that's been a significant change for us. So this is where our programmes sit. I probably don't need to go through them, but just suffice to say we've got a programme at each level, and the coaches programme, which I'm going to talk about, is the practice leader programme. So we do the coaches programme. This is for practice leaders, people on the floor. It has to be people on the floor. We do that as a workplace programme or a generic programme, so we're going to organisations and deliver it. The structure of it is, so I feel like I've speeded up quite a lot now. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. The structure of it is it's 3 really intensive days. How intensive are those days, Dot? The most intensive days you've ever had in your life. Okay. So 1 and 2, we basically throw stuff at people. Here are the concepts, here are the big theories, here are the big ideas. You think about how you're going to take them back. You think about how you're going to adapt that for the service you're in. Okay. Then we spend the 3rd day doing assessments and presentations and action planning. We get the managers to come in and do the action planning, so we've got commitment there, because otherwise why would we do action planning if people are just going to go back 20 minutes left? Okay. I'd slow down now. I've just it's really important that the managers come in on day 3 to do action planning. Okay, because actually otherwise we're sending people off, really excited people off with their action plans. They get back and people go, oh no, you can't do that. I need you to do this. So it's important, isn't it, Dot? Yeah, that people have support from their managers on the last day. So we make that prerequisite of the programme. And then we send people off for 6 months to do workplace assignments. So actually, so we know that they're going to do something. They're going to transfer that learning back to their workplace. And then they come back 6 months later and report on their assignment and they report on their action plan. And I think if you go and see Dot's presentation, she's going to report on her workplace assignment, which was very successful. So this is the content of the coaches program. This is what we get through. But this action planning bit, to me, that's probably the most important session. What are people going to take back to the workplace? We give them a great big folder of resources. They can never read all that in 2 days, but they, you know, do you still dip into your folder, Dot? It's a big, yeah. Chris was complaining, weren't you, about how heavy the folder was, how he couldn't bring it on the plane. It's a big folder. I think that we might have some to show you actually here. So we just give people a lot of information, you know, in the view that this is the beginning of their journey. It's not a task and finish thing, the coaches program. We also really try and embed this 3-tier competence training model, which some of you may be familiar with. So yeah, this gentleman's nodding over here. So Gary Lavinia training model. So when those coaches go back and they're trying to get staff to learn new skills and stuff, we talk about being able to describe something, being able to demonstrate something, and then being able to do it in real life. So that's quite a nice 3-tier competence assessment. Okay, now this is time for the second pyramid of the day. So this, you can probably see here then now, if I made sense earlier, how useful coaches are. So they probably sit about here. So that if you've got these experts coming in with these wonderful plans, these coaches can support these people to deliver that. These coaches here understand a bit more about PBS, so they might be able to help with some of these people that need a bit more support. They're probably quite good at collecting data. And they're really good at keeping all this stuff online. You know, they understand what active support is and the importance of all that stuff. So coaches are kind of, I see them as really integral to this, the success of this pyramid model. So we call them at Build, we call them the jam in the sandwich, or the jelly in the sandwich if you're in America. Although then I did this presentation in America, and apparently they don't always call it jelly, so there was a lot of confusion about why you were having pudding in your sandwich. So anyway, this is the chief executive when he's trying to explain, because he doesn't quite understand PBS. He describes coaches as being the jam in the sandwich. I know what he means. They're the important link between experts and people who actually do the work. Let's not forget, people who actually do the work here. We don't think PBS can really progress without them. They put PBS into practice. They translate expert advice and policy for people that provide that direct support. They do role modelling. They monitor behaviour support plans. They don't necessarily develop them, but they can monitor the success of them, manage some data collection, and most importantly, they motivate, inspire and nurture. So, we've had 1,400 wonderful coaches through the coaches program, including some here in New Zealand, and there has been some significant changes to their practice. We've seen some wonderful things, and what I like doing day 4s at the moment. I like to go and visit the people on day 4s, and sometimes some of the things they've done have just, you know, I heard yesterday about the reduction of seclusion in a forensic unit. But the question for us is, can these changes be maintained? You know, and how do we do that? When you first started the first year, I think I had 25 programs in the first year, and I maintained personal contact with most of those coaches. It was exhausting. My email box was jammed up, and what I realised was people needed ongoing support. They didn't want us to let go of them. So we thought the best way really was to set up a network for them so they could partner with each other. So it's a community of practice, so they get peer support from that. They get some CPD. We have online. They have online. Some people like the online stuff, some people don't, some people like coming to face. But what they really like to do is talking together and working together. And we've seen some amazing collaborations. Organisations that are pretty much in competition, working together, doing peer reviews, sharing their practice, developing stuff together. It's been really, really inspiring, and they pretty much do most of this by themselves. We just facilitate the community for them. The other thing I like to do with the Coaches Network is I like to introduce academics to them. That's a bit of desensitisation. I say that looking at Keith. I don't think Keith would need anyone desensitising there. But that works quite well, and it also gives academics a chance to talk to people who actually do the job as well. So here we are, on to the New Zealand story at last, you say. So we partnered with Explore to deliver a coaches program in Wellington last year, exactly at this time, you know. And it was a good, happy time when the giant squid was still on display. I never won't forgive Sean for that. So this was a program that Dot attended, and this was the first one. So we had people from 4 organisations, was it? 4 different organisations on this program. I don't think Explore knew what to expect. I think some of it might have been a little bit of a shock. Yes, Chris is nodding. So there were some challenges with that. Some challenges, you know, it was quite an exposing program, that one. It challenges getting the right people on the program, because this isn't, if you go back and look at our workforce development program, this isn't a program for people with no knowledge at all. So probably we hadn't been clear enough about that, and we hadn't been clear enough about actually what knowledge people did have to go on the program. But I understand now that the next 2 programs that Explore we've been delivering, that there have been some pre-work done. So people have been doing a readiness course beforehand. So they've been doing a practitioner course. So it wasn't all a terrible shock. You know, I can remember sitting in the first, and some people were just like, "Oh, crikey, this is quite a lot." The challenges were, I was very worried. Would it be a cultural fit? You know, from the UK to New Zealand, where you have got such a cultural richness and diversity, would it actually work? So I had the lovely Kahu Flutie on the program, and we decided yes, it did. It did work. There were some slight differences in maybe quality of life indicators, but the beauty of the coaches program is that we give people the ideas and they go and translate it to meet the needs of the people in their service themselves. Okay. There was a little bit of an expert model in place, so some of the people on the program were really used to other people doing the work for them. And one of our challenges really here is keeping the flame alight. How do we keep, when we've only got how many coaches? How do we keep you all going, you know? So we really need to think about that while we've only got small numbers, don't we? And I think the same things happened we delivered the program in Australia the week before. And the same thing, it's been difficult, hasn't it, to keep such a small number of people in a community, really. So, but saying that, what worked, there was some real organisational commitment from the managers. The managers came on the last day, and some action planners really, really impressed. The cultural fit, the cultural stuff, it worked. There were some outstanding coaches came from that programme and the other one we ran. One of them is here, Dot. Some outstanding results. Really good stuff was done. And the willingness of Explore to embrace a different model was absolutely great, because they could have just gone, "Oh no, this is not what we thought it was." But they've worked really, really hard since then. So what we learned that I say we definitely don't know everything. I definitely don't know everything. Some of it was quite challenging for me. The exposure helped us really tighten up the program. The monthly emails from Chris and Bron asking what this means, how do we do this, made me realise that a lot of it was in my head. I hadn't committed to paper. So the program and the process has been really tightened up, so that's been really helpful. We've had a whole review of our quality assurance process. Okay, 2 minutes. And the consistency that we deliver with And it's really prompted us to think about outcome measures. So how do we benchmark outcomes across the UK and here? How can we tell if it's working here in the same way? So we've really been putting some work into that. And Explore, as I say, realised that they needed, people probably couldn't just come on the coaches programme. They probably needed to go in the organisation and do some work first and help recruit the right people. And it has to be the right people, doesn't it? When it has to be people who are actually going to be able to lead on the floor. Not managers who don't spend time on the floor, not psychologists who just float in and out. So psychology is always trying to get on our programme in the UK. We're to kind of we're always trying to sneak onto it. But we say you're not a practice leader unless you're in the practice all the time. You know, that's what it is. You've got your own courses. So it is about getting the right people. So here's a little picture of the first Wellington cohort. There is stuff that goes on with balloons on the programme, as you can see. I don't know why they all chose to make that one, particularly here. I don't know what that says about New Zealand. Although there were some nice hats. So we've done another programme since then. I didn't personally deliver it. It was the Pohutakoa Forensic Unit in Auckland. My colleague Laura came over to deliver that. She's a forensic specialist. And that's been a successful programme. Would you say they've just been through their day? And we pulled them through. They were very, very keen and very enthusiastic, and some really good results have come through from that. And that, if you come to the session afterwards, you can probably talk a bit about that, can't you? Because you know a bit more about, Ron and Chris know a bit more about that. And then we've got the third one later on this week. So on Tuesday we're flying to Tauranga. Have I said that right? Tauranga. I've been practicing, I haven't quite got the... and we've got a programme there with an organisation called Silk. Okay, so this will be the third one. So where there was only 10 of you, they may well be 30. Okay, so have I got time to talk about the evaluation? Just about. 5 minutes, okay. Do you want to hear about that? Yeah. So we have an independent, I've done quite well in the timing actually, an independent evaluation by the Tizard Centre going on at the moment. So we'll have the first, this is about the impact of the programme. What difference has it made? Has it made a difference to those people's lives? Has it made a difference in organisations? And how can we make it more successful? And how can we make it sustained? So the first results are due in January. The Tizard Centre are surveying all the coaches. So we're hoping that a good percentage of those will answer. We're going to do 5 random organisations as a case study, see what's been going on. And a forum with all the consultants. So they may well be asking you to find out what makes a good facilitator. Because we know that not everyone can facilitate it. It's quite a skill to facilitate this programme. So we're hoping we'll find out what organisational conditions are the most successful, will make it most successful, and what makes a good facilitator. The second phase, next year, will follow cohorts of coaches through. So these are the last couple of slides now. So since coming to New Zealand, one of the things I went back to do was building an evaluation model that we could share with New Zealand. And one of the reasons I've come over is to explain it to you. So if you listen now, we can just drink beer later, okay? So there's a model of evaluation called Kirkpatrick, some of you will know, but it looks at different ways of evaluating. So it looks at the reaction. Did people like the programme? Was it a good programme? Did they learn? Did they learn what we said they were going to learn from it? Has it changed their practice, which is the important thing? If you remember the Train and Hope model, has it actually done anything different to their practice? And we wanted to know is, has it changed the behaviour of organisations? Okay, so our hypothesis for long-term impact. This is what we think will happen in the coaches programme, that there will be an improvement in quality of life for people. There will be a reduction in the use of restrictive practices. That might be medication, it might be physical restraint or seclusion. There will be a reduction in injury, and there will be an improvement in your inspection reports. So this is what we say to people now, based on what we know over the last 3 years anecdotally. Plus, we think there'll be a change in behaviour for staff attending the programme. So staff attending the programme will do something different in their practice when they go back. And we're just measuring that on a simple measurement. Now, the beauty of this is that this is all data that organisations collect anyway. So we're not asking them for anything else. Okay? So let me show you what that looks like. So those are the 4 organisational outcomes. So we have a scoring system of 1, nothing changes, 2, partial change, or 1 partial change, 1 no change, 2 partial change, 3 big change, to say scientifically. So for the 4 organisational outcomes, you could have a possible score of 12. But we also, when we sign up organisations now, when they ring up and Tom talks to them and they want to have a coaches programme, we go, okay, but you have to sign up to this. Those 4 organisational outcomes we want to measure, but do you want to choose some others? Do you have other reasons for wanting this programme? So we get them to define those. We also measure the learning outcomes. Have people learnt what we said they were going to learn on the course? So we go back to the learning outcomes we gave them at the beginning. And then we can test that on the day 3 assessments. We do a written test, we do presentations. Also now, a new thing we've introduced is we get participants to write 3 personal outcomes. So 3 reasons that they wanted to come on the programme. And then we get them to rate them. Have we met them? And this is about, these 3 here are about behaviour change of the staff, of the person who was on the programme. So has their practice changed? So one of the ways we can tell whether their practice changes is by looking at their assessments and their assignments when they come back on day 4. Have they done stuff? Have they done the action plan? Have they done anything? Have they actually changed practice at all? We also ask their line manager. Their line manager thinks that their practice has changed. I'm going to be so on time, Jonathan.
It's tracked up your leg yet, but we lost your mind.
Oh, have you? Okay. Right. And then we have people can self-assess. Do I think my practice has changed? Okay, so that's another assessment. Plus, we have a lot of data coming through from the coaches programme. So we should have plenty data to share. So my absolute last slide is what's next. Oh no, it isn't my quote anyway. So what's next for us is getting the recruitment right, pre-coaches learning, so we get the right people on the programme, get the organisational commitment at the beginning, get the network connected and strong, try and connect you up, and evaluate the impact. And we hope there will be a strong and lasting partnership between Explore to Power and Build that we can both grow within. And my last slide, I'm back to Ted Carr, who says, producing change is not simply a matter of implementing specific techniques, but rather involves relocation of resources, involving time, money, and political power. So I just leave you with that. And I would say thank you very much for listening. Sorry it's been a bit erratic, the microphone.